What healthy food is actually terrible for you? Story 1. Remember when everyone suddenly became afraid of the word fat in the 90s, so companies started leaning into fat-free products? The most popular snack brand was Snackwell's, whose products were completely fat-free. Although to make them taste edible, they were loaded with sugar and refined carbs, which we as a nation weren't yet looking into, and that caused people to overeat the snacks without getting full. I always think about Snackwell's when questions like this pop up, because I honestly think that's when America's obesity crisis hit a point of no return. I wonder what would have happened to us as a nation if the fat-free craze never happened. Answer: my diet-obsessed mom used to plow through those devil's food cakes like they were going out of style. She'd have been better off eating candy. Most of the crap that she fed us in the 80s and 90s was fat-free or artificially low-fat. That crap was barely food. I can remember my childhood lunch bag containing 65 calorie per slice bread that had basically zero nutritional value, fat-free Miracle Whip, which was an absolute abomination, even with the added sugar, a slice of fat-free processed cheese food, and turkey bologna, which was in no way healthier than regular bologna, but tasted worse. I'd usually get that, coupled with a pre-made sugar-free Jell-O cup and a bag of baked potato chips, or the Alestra chips that made you shoot your pants, and of course, a Diet Coke. Story 2. Lol in gluten-free, and the number of people that think it's healthier is hilarious. You don't want to see the ingredients in my bread? Answer: when I worked at Whole Foods and would print labels for stuff, it amazed me how many things I'd never heard of were in vegan stuff. You'd think that would be healthier, but the alternative meat and dairy-esque stuff always came at the price of being made of really weird stuff. It's so funny that people think, oh, gluten-dairy meat is bad for me. Better eat this alternative, when their replacements are often chock full of weird stuff you probably wouldn't eat on their own. Story 3. Interesting how many people in the comments are conflating higher calories with unhealthy. A whole avocado runs about 300 calories. That doesn't make it unhealthy. Answer: I think a lot of people these days are getting diet and nutrition advice from reels without looking into the source or their motives. I'm always skeptical of what I see on Instagram, especially if they make outlandish, dramatic, or broad-stroke claims. I check profiles and only follow people who have actually studied their topic of interest and say sensible things. And I always check to see if the person is promoting a product like supplements, miracle food drinks, or a protein powder brand you've never heard of. That's usually a dead giveaway not to trust them. Story 4. In this thread is just a lot of people conflating not as healthy as marketed or my biases against foods with terrible for you. Seriously, fruit, peanut butter, and tofu aren't terrible for you. Edit. Also people who are conflating general you with personal you. We aren't talking about your specific allergies. Answer: I have some health conditions that make maintaining weight hard, so I've been seeing a specialist through my local hospital network. I told her that sometimes I eat fruit as a snack, and she got so upset and told me fruit is awful for you and that I need to stop immediately. Same with peanut butter. I listened to Maintenance Phase and have a lot of general health knowledge and canceled all future appointments with her. Story 5. Redditors, get yourselves some nutritional knowledge. Some of these comments are like, water is terrible for you because if you drink too much, you could die. Story 6. Everyone in the comments is having a fit over relatively benign things that are fine in moderation, but am old enough to remember when they came out with the healthy alternative oil for frying potato chips that instantly gave everyone anal leakage. Story 7. We're only 10 minutes in, and already we're conflating terrible for you with not necessarily as healthy as advertised. Story 8. UTF even is this thread. I saw someone mention Cliff Bars as being unhealthy because they're high calorie and packed with sugar and duh? That's the fudge point? Those kinds of granola snack bars aren't meant as a healthy food for weight loss. They're meant to be eaten as a source of quick and dense energy while doing strenuous activities like hiking. It's like trying to use a piece of gym equipment while sitting upside down on the machine and then blaming the machine because you were doing it wrong. Answer: exactly. To make another example, I'm training for a marathon, and a lot of people advise you to pack pure maple syrup with a bit of salt for training runs. Should I be drinking pure maple syrup every morning, like I'm trying to reenact the opening scene of Super Troopers? No, but it's great win for keeping you from crashing out when you're running double-digit miles. The problem is that people have taken sports nutrition like Gatorade and Cliff Bars and used them as a mid-afternoon pick-me-up while sitting at their desk job. Calories are important for endurance sports. Answering phones are not an endurance sport, as much as it may feel like it. Story 9. Nutella was originally marketed as a healthy alternative to peanut butter before people started looking at the nutrition facts and realized it's packed with sugar. Story 10. Anything advertised as fat-free, turns out they loaded it with sugar to replace fat. And natural fat in moderation is actually good for you. Answer: to be fair, I don't think I've seen anything advertised as fat-free in ages. Seems like a very 90s thing. Edit. Going to amend this so I can stop replying to everyone. Yes, dairy products do typically say 0 milk fat versus 1 or 2. Dairy, in many regions, is regulated on the basis of how much milk fat is in the product and needs to be labeled as such. It's not an advertising scheme. Back in the day, so many products were specifically advertised on the packaging as fat-free. Basically, everything had this, even foods that generally didn't even have fat in them to begin with. Someone here mentioned Snackwells, which was a prime example of this. Personally, I haven't seen fat-free or some variation of that on any products in ages, but maybe your mileage varies. Story 11. Comments are wild and eye-opening. Folks aren't reading labels or understanding basic nutrition. Yes, let's all avoid fruits because Chex notes all sugar is bad even when it's naturally occurring. Story 12. No foods are categorically terrible for you if eaten in moderation. Heck, eating a triple-fried cupcake isn't terrible for you if you do it once a year. I think we need to get away from demonizing foods and instead look at overindulgent behaviors that make these things bad. The best thing you can do is diversify your diet, making the impact of any single food negligible. Story 13. Every single thing that was fed to my fat child self. I was so fucking fat. Love my parents, but holy shoot, they perpetuated my childhood obesity much longer than it needed to be. Story 14. Coconut oil. I work in cardiac rehab. So many people think of coconut oil as a healthy oil, using it in everything. Coconut oil is a saturated fat and can still cause heart health issues if overused, like raising LDL cholesterol. Answer: scrolled far to find this. As someone with genetically high cholesterol in my early 30s, I was horrified to see coconut oil has around 14 g saturated fat per tablespoon. For context, I'm trying to keep my daily saturated fat intake between 10 and 12 grams. It's also funny how in all the healthy cookbooks, almost all the dessert recipes use a cup or more of coconut oil as a butter substitute. At that point, just use butter. Story 15. I recently bought some single-serving oatmeal cups. They have 11 to 13 grams of sugar each per like half a cup of oatmeal. Answer: pro tip. Just buy a bag of oats. All you really need to make quick oatmeal is some hot water. Pour in a little hot water and cover the top of the bowl with a small plate for like 10-15 minutes, and the oats will be super soft. If you want a creamier mouthfeel, add a little piece of butter. You can top the oatmeal with honey or whatever else suits your taste. Story 16. Well, now that the Maha dipshits are pushing beef tallow as a health food, I feel like that could be a valid answer here. Story 17. Himalayan pink salt. So many people started using fancy salt that iodine deficiency is a thing again. Story 18. Juice cleanses. It's not so much that juice is terrible for you, even though it has an equivalent amount of sugar to soda with very little nutritional content. But it's the scam of the diet industry telling people that any type of drink will cleanse toxins from your body. If you have a liver and kidneys, you're getting cleansed constantly. Story 19. Kava. I know it has some religious ceremonial purposes, but I feel like it's been co-opted by white hippies. That shoot is really bad for your liver with continuous use. Story 20. For years, people on Reddit have been talking about making healthy sandwiches using Nutella instead of peanut butter. The first ingredient in Nutella is sugar. It's basically frosting. Story 21. I don't think there's really any individual food that's terrible for you. Probably the closest answer would be wine, as no amount of adult beverage is actually good for you. And I recall people saying wine was healthy. Foods aren't healthy or unhealthy, good or bad. What's important is your overall diet. You can incorporate just about every common suggestion into a healthy diet. Story 22. Probably Terra veggie chips, though I don't really care. Those are my MVP and I can demolish a whole bag in one sitting. Story 23. Not terrible for you, but AA berries are not anywhere close to the miracle fruit that it's marketed as. It's nutritionally not that great a fruit compared to other fruit. Story 24. No added sugar anything requires suspicion. They'll either use fruit processed of the good stuff, so it's basically just the sugar, or maltodextrin, which is higher GI than sugar but isn't chemically a sugar, so is counted just as a carb for nutrition labels. It does the same thing sugar does in your body. Story 25. Coconut oil. High saturated fat. I dislike that it and coconut milk is in everything now. Plus, the taste is so strong it overwhelms so many other flavors. Story 26. Olive oil. Most of the major supermarket chains are actually 90 canola with only 10 olive oil added. They determined that US consumers were too clueless to know the difference. Turns out they are correct. Want 100 olive oil? Try Costco or Trader Joe's. They are the only ones to guarantee that product is pure. Story 27. I'm a big fan of vegan meat substitutes in general, but I tend to go for things like tofu, beans, and homemade vegan burgers. ECT, because a lot of frozen substitutes are breaded, have high fat content, are highly processed, and don't contain a lot of whole veggies. Not that they are worse than meat, but I feel like excessive oil and low fiber content kind of defeats the purpose. I still enjoy them occasionally, but I'd prefer to eat foods that are higher in actual veggie content than highly processed substitutes. Still love Beyond and Impossible burgers, but they are pretty heavily processed. They aren't terrible for you, but personally, I try not to eat a ton of it. Story 28. Well, not terrible per se, but fruit juice is incredibly sugary. Yes, it's natural sugar, but it's still sugar. So, when PPL drink it constantly in lieu of soda, believing they're being healthy, they're not actually helping themselves or their teeth much at all. Story 29. Any egg that is served at a fast food place. Eggs contain one ingredient, maybe 4 if you add salt, pepper, butter. Dunkin' has like 15. Story 30. Artificial sweeteners. There's a lot of research finding that certain ones cause anything from gut bacteria disruption to higher risk of stroke. Cries in taking a medication that contains a ton of sucralose. Story 31. That depends on the makeup of someone's genetic history. What food would be rather benign or healthy can be something they can't process or is actively hurt by consuming. And like some others have said, any food can be bad for you if you eat enough of it. There's no single healthy food that 100 provides everything that is needed. Gotta balance your diet with various things. And a fair mix of solids and liquids is important. Story 32. Impossible meat substitutes are often seen as healthier than meat. but they are so insanely high in sodium, it's baffling. Story 33. Always check the sugar content of low-fat foods. That can be an easy way to determine if you should just have less of the real stuff. I won't use margarine at all, so many better alternatives to that. Story 34. Most health food you see in grocery stores. You're better off eating whole foods than processed bullshit bars marketed as healthy. Story 35. Perhaps not terrible, but the protein market has gone wild. Listen, you don't need that much protein throughout your day. 50 g of protein per meal is a lot for most people. If you're sedentary, you approximately need 0.83 g of proteins kg of body weight, and this needs to be balanced out from first to last meal. Most people who don't heavily train could get too much protein and end up getting weight and not losing it. Protein is a building block to our bodies, but it's also an energy source in last resort. Once you got the proteins you needed, it will turn into adipose tissue. The problem that most people have most likely is that they don't get enough protein in the morning. Don't get obsessed with taking proteins because you most likely get enough every day. Cheers. Story 36. Low-fat versions of things. Most of what they do to make it low-fat adds other stuff to it that is more chemical junk you don't want. Story 37. Low-no-fat versions of foods are generally loaded with awful stuff. Just have the regular thing in moderation. Story 38. Milk is fine for kids, but having dairy in the food pyramid was unhinged. Then folks overreacting, cutting it out entirely, and developing dairy allergies that stopped them from eating the occasional pizza was also stupid. Dietary extremes are typically not ideal. Story 39. Flavored yogurt looks all wholesome with fruit picks on the tub, but half the time it's basically pudding cosplaying as health food. Story 40. Almost all processed foods, even those that have been marketed as healthy. Example: healthy cereals. All cereal is worthless, just a mixture of sugar and dyes and bullshit. A lot are fortified, and some parents may cite this as a reason why they give it to their kids. But at that point, just eat fudge fruit and vegetables to get your micronutrients in. If you can't tolerate plants, take a multivitamin. Also, I'm gluten-free, but just because something doesn't have gluten doesn't mean it's healthy. Those nasty, store-bought, gluten-free products that are offered as alternatives to gluten-ridden food is awful. Might as well eat the fudge donut, the real one. Gluten can be inflammatory even for people that aren't allergic to it for some reason. But those gums and other filler ingredients that replace gluten are awful in their own way too. Story 41. Red wine might be it if you haven't been paying attention and are still on the 1 glass a day per meal is good for you. Adult beverage in any quantity is bad for you. In addition to all the other bad stuff about it, it is top-tier carcinogen comparable to tobacco smoke. Story 42. Fruit juice. Unless you're blending and consuming the whole fruit including pulp, basically a smoothie, you're basically having sugar water with a few vitamins. Removing the pulp of fruit removes the fiber, which is essential for gut health. Whole fruit will always be best, but smoothies can be made healthy depending on what you have in them. Also, please learn to read nutritional labels if you don't know how, and read the labels of the products you're consuming. A lot of foods have more added sugar than you think they do. Story 43. Coconut oil is very high in saturated fat. Better off focusing on other plant-based oils like olive in terms of health impact. Story 44. Those veggie straw chips are just as bad for you as most other chips. They're still frying them in oil. Story 45. Carbs, only sugar. If you cut out all carbs from your diet, you will die. If you're that worried about sugar intake, don't look at the carbs line. Look at the fudge sugar-satted sugars line. If it has a decent amount of carbs with little to no sugar, you've got starch and fiber, really good carbs that your body absolutely needs to function. Story 46. Organic is a marketing term and no more or less healthy than the conventional version of the food. In terms of produce, it just means the producer got a certification from a private company that sells certifications that the growing practices they use don't utilize certain pesticides. But organic farming still uses organic approved pesticides, so that organic lettuce you pay an extra 1.25 for isn't necessarily any cleaner than the conventional lettuce. And it certainly doesn't have more nutrients or is in any way healthier. Also, GMO isn't the boogeyman they make it out to be. Not every genetically modified organism has had gene splice to make it glow in the dark. It often just means they have been the product of selective breeding, something that farmers have done for millennia to produce the best version of the crop they are growing. Story 47. Anything fat-free is loaded with sugar to make up for the missing macronutrients. Hard pass. Not all fats are bad, guys. Story 48. Dihydrogen monoxide. If you get this stuff in your lungs, you can't breathe and will die, drown. Also, too much of the stuff in your body is toxic and can also eliminate you, hyponatremia. Shockingly, the stuff is everywhere on Earth, in your water pipes, and even in your body. Educate yourselves, people. Story 49. There's a whole school of stuff marketed towards athletes. Stuff to put in your water, stuff to eat during activities. It's candy. It's all sugar and salt. Sometimes with a little magnesium or potassium in some pseudoscientifically determined ratios. You need calories to keep going in an athletic activity, and sugar is an easy source of those calories. You maybe need to replace those salts you lose while sweating, though science questions this. But drinking sugar water and downing fancy gummy bears is still just nutrition-free refined sugar. If you're drinking it because it's the thing to do when you exercise, without paying attention to the calories you're intaking versus burning, don't be surprised if you gain weight. Story 50. Fruit juice, even without added sweeteners, is fine for lots of people, but if they have diabetes, nope. Story 51. I wouldn't say a food per se, but I would say portion size. It's amazing how many people underestimate the size of the things they eat and don't understand how small the serving size is. I've known people who ate a bag of walnuts and feel healthy, yet they just ate 1,500 calories in like 10 minutes. Story 52. Smoothie bowls. They look super healthy but can be packed with sugar and calories if you're not careful. Story 53. Granola. I know. It's got that whole yoga retreat, hiking boots, wholesome breakfast vibe, but some of it is basically dessert in disguise. Most store-bought granolas are loaded with sugar, syrup, and oils that would make a cupcake blush. It's tricky, too. You look at the packaging, earth tones, maybe a little picture of oats and berries, but then you check the label. Story 54. Protein bars and really any health or protein snack sold for gym junkies. Loaded with a laundry list of ingredients you won't recognize and can cause havoc on your gut if you eat them regularly. Story 55. I think generic muffins at the store or chain food places like Starbucks and Dunkin' are really bad for you. Your average blueberry muffin is closer to cake than to a wholesome breakfast. But they can be healthier if it's made with alternatives like healthy fats instead of seed oils, refined sugar instead of white, whole grain instead of white flour, etc. Story 56. I used to know a girl who would eat bread and avoid anything with fats in it because she assumed fats make you fat. Story 57. Anything that actively claims to be healthy. Every sugar substitute is more harmful than the sugar it replaces. Story 58. Salad dressing is actually not very good for you despite salads having a reputation of being healthier food. Story 59. Just a Chick-fil-A grilled chicken patty has 46 ingredients. I thought it was seasoned chicken, but it has filler and preservatives and whatnot. Story 60. In Australia, people still love their acai puree bowls, doused with sugar syrup, chocolate sauce, sweetened peanut butter. Story 61. It's funny that the top 10 comments are people telling everyone they're wrong and not actually answering the question. Story 62. Pet peeve. Foods are not healthy. Bodies are healthy. Food can be more or less nutritious for an individual's activity level, allergies, sensitivities, and overall diet. That is so variable even at the individual level. Story 63. You can mostly eat whatever you want as long as you have a balanced diet. Lol, TikTok. Needs banned purely for poisoning people's minds. But I guess that was their goal, wasn't it? Story 64. Fruit juices. They are highly concentrated in sugar, namely fructose. And high concentration of fructose absence of fiber nightmare for your liver, which bears the burden of processing the fructose, since liver cells are the only ones that can handle fructose. Excess fructose leads to liver fat, which is one of the worst places to accumulate fat from a metabolic standpoint. Story 65. Flavored yogurt. It's packed with sugar and barely better than dessert, but it still gets pushed as a healthy snack. Story 66. Actually, healthy foods are pretty strictly limitile to the fresh fruit, fresh veggies, and whole meat and dairy products that make up 5 to 10 of the profits from and contents of most grocery stores today. That's really it. Everything else is processed somehow, and this is always the shoot what gets you all fudge up in the head about eating and eliminate you after torturing you for years. It's not the gluten or whatever that eliminate or harms most people. It's diseases caused by the highly processed grain residues. 95% of the plant gets discarded. This makes all grain-based foods simply residues from a scientific viewpoint, and all the other industrial waste chemicals they add and use to these foods to try to convince us you actually can eat it. Story 67. A lot of foods that are marketed as healthy or perceived as healthy are largely due to people not actually reading the food labels. Some examples would include Bolt House smoothies. The lowest amount of sugar I've seen in a bottle is 25 g, and the most I've seen is 52 dates. In moderation, they are great for you. However, people seem to forget that 2 is the serving amount, and people don't usually have that many. 4 dates are 60 to 64 g of sugar, and 6 dates are anywhere from 90 to 96 g of sugar. Low fat to fat-free, read the label. Usually these products will replace the fat with sugar and sodium to make it taste better. You can find good low-fat or fat-free products, but read the label to check the sugar and sodium content. Some types of dried fruits. It really depends which type you grab. Some are fine. Definitely try grabbing the ones that say unsweetened, otherwise the sugar content gets kinda crazy. For example, sweetened dried mango, Walmart brand, 26 g sugar, 21 g of added, and unsweetened dried mango, Walmart brand, is 15 g of sugar. Story 68. Any diet or zero soft drinks. If you want to be healthier, the first thing you should do is eliminate soft drinks from your diet entirely, or at least only have them occasionally as a treat. Drinking any soft drink on a daily basis is terrible for you, even if it's the healthy version. Story 69. Many yogurts are so overloaded with sugar, it's insane. It's got as much sugar as candy or ice cream. I greatly prefer plain whole milk yogurt like the Blue Phage, and just season it to taste with some maple syrup or honey and fruit, plus protein oats for more substance. Story 70. I'm hesitant to say any food is terrible for you, aside from things that are allergens or gone bad. I think a point this comment section is really making is that everything needs to be in moderation. Too much of anything could produce side effects. But, just one take. Grains are really pushed, at least in the US, as the most important part of the meal. Now, carbs and grains are not bad for you by any means, but they don't need to be the main part of a meal. They'll give you energy for sure, but for long-lasting energy, or vitamins, etc., You're better off looking to proteins and veg. Story 71. Someone from my work brought in these energy drink shots that have 0 sugar and 0 calories and wanted us to try them. There was one that was supposed to taste like orange, but when I drank it, it tasted like an orange that was dipped in maple syrup and smelled horrific. Like, I'd rather have actual sugar in it. I even remember feeling a bit nauseous and sick after drinking it. So basically, almost anything advertised as 0 sugar just has awful artificial sweeteners that taste like shoot and are probably even worse for you than actual real sugar. Story 72. Coconut oil. 2 TBSP contains more than your daily allowance of saturated fat, which is 20 irene. Saturated fat is a major contributor to visceral fat, as dangerous if not more so than added sugar. Story 73. Anything labeled organic. 80 of the time it's produced exactly how the non-organic stuff is. It's just got the label. Do your research. Story 74. It's not unhealthy, but as a bodybuilder, it bothers me how often people offer peanut butter as a protein source. Peanut butter is more fat than protein. Fat itself is fine, too many calories isn't. If I need to eat 3,000 calories and 200 grams of protein today, and I've eaten 2,500 calories and 150 grams of protein, then I need egg whites or whey, not peanut butter, which will have twice the grams of fat as it does protein. And since fat is roughly 9 calories per gram compared to the 4 calories per gram in protein and carbs, it has a terrible protein to calorie ratio. TLDR, peanut butter is primarily fat, not protein. Story 75. Beyond Burger and all the artificial fake meats, ultra-processed, full of fats, sodium, and sugars. Many additives that are not adequately tested. Answer. Beyond Burgers have less saturated fats and cholesterol, none, compared to a regular burger. They also have no sugar. The trade-off is that Beyonds have higher sodium. The additives are all well studied and safe. Compared to normal burgers, they're fine, and even have an edge over beef, as red meat is linked to heart disease and some cancers. Now, if you're sitting there and eating a Beyond Burger, veggie nuggets, or beef burgers every day, that's not healthy in any sense, LOL. Story 76. Actimel. They're advertised as healthy and good for your gut health and whatever, but it's literally just sugar and milk. Same goes for almost all of these milk good for your gut advertised products. Story 77. Nothing. Like food is meant to keep you alive and functioning. It's less of a matter overall of the food itself and more about how much you're intaking and if it's too much for your body. It's also dependent on how active you are. Could we technically eat healthier? Yeah, absolutely. But overall, is it more of an issue that we don't exercise? 100. Story 78. Margarine initially marketed as healthier than butter. Just use butter. Calorie-free drinks, not as healthy as water, but it is okay from time to time, I guess. But some of those sweeteners you find on those drinks are cancerous. Story 79. I recently discovered that 100 grams of cashew nuts has more calories than a full-size 100 gram chocolate bar, around 600 kcal. And 100 grams of nuts really doesn't feel like much. It's healthy in small doses, but if you eat a whole bowl or bag, then you'll gain more weight than most people would think. Story 80. Most vegan alternatives for meat and dairy are heavily processed and flavored. If you're replacing something already very processed, it's not a big deal, but it's not healthy just because it's vegan. Story 81. Ivermectin. It will help the user crap their intestinal lining out. At least they did their own research.